Hi, my name is Gary Stewart, and I'm the founder of FounderTribes. Welcome to our second event for 2022 on how founders can kind of build and generate their wealth. I have a little bit of a presentation, so Petar, feel free to start sharing. Yeah, so I guess the first thing I want to say is thanks to those of you that kind of came to join us. Next slide. Obviously, a lot has changed since the last time that we saw each other on February 17th. Next slide. Yeah, I guess as we all know, kind of like the world has kind of gone a little bit mad, I guess, in large part because of one particular person. And all of a sudden, people like Vladimir Zelensky become kind of household names, and we're all following him and being inspired by him. And I guess the only thing I wanted to say in my own little way was, next slide. Slava Ukraini. Glory to Ukraine. I think that in our own little way here at FounderTribes, I think that we definitely identify with the mission. Next slide. Obviously, I don't have the same sort of courage as even the average Ukrainian grandmother. But I still think that the reason that we set up FounderTribes is because we also think that there are a lot of battles that we have to face every single day as founders or as people that come from underrepresented categories. And there's no reason that we shouldn't also be allowed to realize our dreams. Next slide. So a little bit about me. I'm an exited serial entrepreneur. I used to run an accelerator program in the UK called Telefonica, called Wyra, where we invested in early stage companies backed by a large telco called Telefonica. And when I left, we had generated a portfolio of about $1.5 billion in the UK alone. Most recently, I've been a visiting lecturer of entrepreneurship at Yale Law School, and written in Forbes. And I guess, in general, the whole idea is that being a founder, especially going through it again this time, it's just a really painful experience. And I think we have to do something to make the experience a lot less painful. Next slide. So it's not just me. There are hundreds of millions of founders that are around the globe. I think the number is 582 million founders globally when we think not only about tech, but about all small business owners. And it's likely that people like Christina, who might have founded a beauty salon in Brooklyn, and she is the first in our family to graduate from college and doesn't have too many mentors or people who can guide her, or people like Anthony, who lives outside of a major city, kind of where investment tends to abound. These sorts of folks are the ones who are going to be even more likely to not be able to access, funding and support that they need. Next slide. And this translates into about 90% of the 582 million founders that I talked about before, failing within kind of a few years, right? So that's 470 million businesses that are likely to fail. Another data point, if we just look at the 4.4 million businesses that were created in the US alone in 2020, 4 million of them are going to fail, and we just kind of accept this as something that is somehow acceptable. And again, for founders like Christine and Anthony, it's even worse. Next slide. And it's worse because if you're a woman, even though women are 51% of the population, they only get about 2.4% of the funding in the United States. If you're Black or Latinx, even though we represent together about 33% of the US population, we only get about 2.6% of the funding. If you don't live in New York, San Francisco, or Boston, then again, that's those three states, or the states that those three cities are in, represent about almost 90% of all venture capital funding. So you kind of have to go to one of those states, or you're out of luck. And likewise, if you didn't go to a kind of Ivy League or Ivy comparable school, well, you might also be out of luck because that's where all of the VCs went, right? So even though they only represent 0.5% of the population, more than almost 50% of all VCs went to Harvard, Stanford, or Yale. Next slide. So this is why we created FounderTribes, because we understand that at the end of the day, everyone deserves to be an entrepreneur. It's the kind of best way to create intergenerational wealth. But the kind of stumbling blocks are that you need to have the right kind of learning, kind of understanding how the game is played. You need to have access to networks and you need to have access to funding. And again, if lawyers have law school and doctors have medical school, why shouldn't founders also have some sort of school or some sort of kind of experience that allows them to avoid making easy mistakes and to get the support that they need to get to the next level? Next slide. And we're really lucky today to have Nicola from NASDAQ, because NASDAQ has been pioneering in this sense as well, noting that the biggest obstacles facing Black founders are exactly those two issues that I mentioned, mentorship and money, which is what we've been created to kind of solve. Next slide. So how does it work? Really simple. For those of you that might have heard of a startup accelerator, it's very similar, except that it's a digital experience. So you upload a pitch, then you kind of get that pitch evaluated by people who are from the area, from the kind of vertical or industry that you're starting your company in. They will give you feedback. And if the feedback is that the company is already at a stage where it can be invested in or supported by some other form of funding, then we will kind of put the founder in touch with the different menu of options. But if that's not the case, then we can kind of match the founder with mentors as well as content that can help them get to the point where when we put them in front of investors or other funding sources like banks or grants, et cetera, that they'll be more likely to succeed. Next slide. And this is all done by kind of powerful matching algorithms. So the idea behind it is, if we live in 2022, where the way that most people kind of find their romantic relationships is through a dating app, why can't we use the same sort of concept to support founders? Why can't we have a kind of professional matching app that allows for people to kind of meet the mentors and other and funders that they may need to kind of get their business to the next level? Next slide. And we want to do this in a way that's inclusive. So we're doing something that we call weaponizing inclusivity, which is simply this notion that we're not going to change the way the world operates. If you went to the same university as someone, you're 34.4% more likely to want to work with them. If you belong to the same race on top of that, you're 39.2% more likely to want to work with them on top of the 34.4%. So why don't we just allow people to kind of figure out who within the universe of potential mentors and funders have something in common with them, so that they can then start a relationship with someone that's actually going to see them, as opposed to the experience that I guess a lot of us face, which is that we don't feel like we're actually being seen or heard. Next slide. And the goal, and you can go to the next slide as well, the goal is eventually to kind of become the de facto networking platform for all founders, and then for all people of any sort of professional background. Next slide. So we prepared a little video that kind of shows you a little bit of the FounderTribes experience. I'm going to ask Petar now to share that video with you. We live in a world where 99.9% of the world's 600 million entrepreneurs are treated like roadkill. They might not be from the right race, or they might not be from the right gender, or maybe they don't live in the right postcode, or might not have attended the right school. And because they don't sound or look the part, they will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they need to start up and scale up their businesses. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity is not. FounderTribes exists to change that. Our mobile app uses machine learning to match founders with the investors, mentors, and educational support that they need. We're like Tinder, but for founders. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Each founder gets qualified feedback about the weakest areas of their business plan, as articulated in their pitch. They are evaluated according to the 10 elements of a business plan, as per Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. There are two possible outcomes. If a founder is deemed investable, they will automatically be matched with investors appropriate for their stage and vertical. A founder can also choose to see investors who have made the hire or set the wire in the past, meaning investors with a track record of investing in or hiring people of backgrounds similar to the founders. If a founder is not deemed investable, they will be offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders relating to their areas of weakness. They will also be matched with expert mentors to work through their risk factors. When the founder is finally deemed investable by their mentor and the community, they will then be introduced to the relevant investors for them with an optimized chance of success. Our database includes 18,000 angels, 3,000 venture capitalists, and 5,000 mentors. Our world-class content comes from such gurus as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wang, and Anne Wojcicki. We have distribution deals on 4 continents, including with the City of New York, London and Partners, Silicon Valley Bank, Capital Enterprise, and Unicaf. We have also raised $1.2 million from British investors such as Velocity Capital Advisors and Chris Topman, and American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, the founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, the founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, and Dana Wagner, Chief Legal Officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.5 billion from investors including Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. If software is eating the world, it's time for the startup ecosystem itself to be disrupted. It's no longer acceptable to relegate and ignore 99.9% of founders. FounderTribes uses machine learning to empower millions of entrepreneurs around the world, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. We hope that you will join us. Please download the app today. All right, so last 2 comments from me. Download the app if you haven't. We are on the App Store at both iOS and Google. So please, download it. Send us your feedback. And now, next slide. Without much further ado, I kind of want to introduce you to our host of this event. Next slide. Yeah, it's going to be Jamie Broderick. He's also one of our investors, our biggest angel investors. Someone who's super committed to investing in founders of all backgrounds, women, minorities, the intersectionality of both, etc. Jamie has loads of experience in wealth management. So when we put together today's event, I could think of no one better to actually lead us on this event today. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Gary. And thanks a lot for inviting me to participate in this amazing event. I really appreciate it. So we're here to discuss the proposition that founders need to think like wealth managers, how to start and grow your fortune. So I'm Jamie Broderick. I'm a former CEO of UBS Wealth in the UK. So I'm a wealth manager. Most people think a wealth manager's job is to figure out how to make you a lot of money in the financial markets. And actually, that's only part of the job. The first part, and the most important part, is to understand the client. So what a financial advisor should be doing, or a wealth manager should be doing in collaboration with their client, is to figure out, who is this client? Who is the client? What are her life circumstances? What are her objectives for her life and for her money? How much risk is she willing to take on? What and who does she most value in life? That's really where the whole process starts. And with a little bit of help, and I hope you can get some here today, that's the part you can do yourself. Just become much more self-aware of your priorities, your plans, and your time horizon. So, for the second part, yes, you definitely need some technical advice. You need an expert to help you get to your financial objectives. And it needs to be somebody that you can trust and who's going to be objective and really seriously has your interest in mind. But that's the tail end of the process. It starts with you and your own self-awareness. So I've got some really smart, accomplished people today who can help you with this whole process. Can we bring them on screen? So I've got Nicola Corzine is the founding executive director of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. Hi, Nicola, nice to see you. So this is a nonprofit, delivers world-class resources and mentoring to entrepreneurs around the world. And since it was set up in 2015, did I get that right?
That's right.
Your center has delivered education, resources, and mentoring to, and this I have to check with you, 30,000 people?
Believe it or not, in the last year, thanks to the pandemic, a little bit, unfortunately, we're at 55,000 now from 120 countries.
That's just amazing. So that's what helps them move their business forward and advance global, ultimately global economic development. And Gary told me that half the community are female founders and 62% are minority entrepreneurs.
That's correct.
This is going to be interesting. And Bryant, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Bryant is a director at American Express by day, but in his spare time, he's the founder of My Million Year, a life coaching and personal finance coaching company that helps ordinary people achieve their goals, retire early, and live life on their own terms. Bryant, where were you when I needed you most?
I'm here now, Jamie.
Well, thanks, but now I'm already retired. Dumb and retired. So, Nicholas, so you at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. So talk about. So you've run 30,000 people through this process. Talk about what entrepreneurs should do to make sure they're taken seriously when they pitch for funding. So you've got a bunch of entrepreneurs in the audience. What do they need to do? What do they need to take seriously? So tools, training, preparation. Who should they talk to get advice? And I think it'd be helpful and useful for people in the audience to know if there are particular challenges that women and minority entrepreneurs face when they're fundraising and how they should deal with them. So over to you.
Thank you. Well, such a great question, such a great setup. And I'm going to actually flip it back to some of those early words that you encourage people to think through in your introduction. And that is...
Somebody's fire alarm.
Not my cooking, I promise. That authenticity element, that you've got to start with knowing who you are. Your origin story as a founder is one of the most powerful tools that is underestimated and underappreciated, I think, every day of the week. I was an angel investor, former entrepreneur, so I've been on both sides, and I can promise in all instances, when we talk about those dream states of finding value-add investors, it's because the people believe in the vision that you're setting. And you can't hide behind charts, and you can't hide behind incredible graphs that don't resonate with you personally. People do business with people. They want to know that client relationship. They want to know who you are and what you're drawn to. And the most important part in this conversation today, how you define success. Most companies are not going to exit through IPO. Some of them will. Many companies will exit through alternative modes. So trying to window dress to a state that doesn't resonate to you personally or doesn't matter to you is never going to be the answer and the tool that you want to when you're connecting with investors. Again, I think I speak for pretty much every angel investor out there. We want to get to know you, your motivations, because at the end of the day, our job is to help hold you up on those hard days and be there to encourage you when the things are great. But there'll be a lot of moments where if we haven't really connected on understanding why you're doing and why you're building what you're building, how generational wealth matters to you, what you want to be doing in 10 and 20 years' time, do you still want to be in that leadership role? Do you want to have transitioned and be on a beach somewhere, enjoying a passive income? However you define it, one size does not fit all in entrepreneurship. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So let us get to understand you, your drivers to success, and don't shy away from that. It's some of the most important work out there. Now, when you're pitching, obviously, as we'll get into it, there are a lot of the technical, mechanical elements. I grew up with the Ron Conway and the Guy Kawasaki styles. I think there's a lot of great templatization out there. But I don't want anyone to sort of walk away going, well, I just have to cookie cutter my approach and fall into lockstep with like the traditional pitch. At the end of the day, the words are only there in support of your dream and your vision on what you're building towards, and getting real clear on the mechanics behind the model as an example. So we always used to say this in the investment days, whatever numbers you put on a piece of paper are guaranteed not to be true.
Yeah.
It's not that point that matters, right, Jamie? It's
right.
about understanding the logic behind it. And it's not about raising a flat number for the sake of raising a flat number. It's It's about understanding what milestones are being made possible as a result of you being able to lean in and achieve the impossible dreams of an entrepreneur. So where are you heading? What's your North Star? How do we break that down into micro steps? Again, for the investor, and I think, again, sometimes this gets lost a little bit in translation, our greatest risk is getting you to the next round. So being able to really understand how you're going to get to a self-sustaining mode or gain greater optionality to get on that course with the money that we're providing into a company is so critical. And then when I get down to sort of the network effect, that criticality, what Founders Tribe is all about, really building and bridging that social network of support. Don't underestimate the power of connections and the art of what's possible when, again, you connect with people that you aspire into, that you delight up to, and that you look within your network to say, how can I learn? I'll give you one other hack that has worked well for me in my career, because, again, I think sometimes it's underestimated. Everyone wants to get to the Mark Andreessens of the world. Awesome. Continue. Go do that. But take it down one layer and also start to think, like, how do I define the investors that inspire me? And then what are the companies that they have invested in? Sometimes the easiest connection point is to get to the portfolio company. And anytime a portfolio company ever pinged me and said, I just met the most amazing founder, you have to meet them, 9 times out of 10, I was far more likely to prioritize that ask than if it was an inbound, unsolicited kind of deal flow opportunity. So prioritize the relationships where you do have more power than you think, but work it just like you would anything else. Don't go beyond sort of 10 to 12 meaningful relationships. Go back to Jamie's point at the start. It's all about the relationship. Prioritize, protect, and then come in with a level of authenticity and learning that you can do.
That's great, Nicola. Thank you. I have another question for you, but I'm gonna move on to Bryant. And in the meantime, can I just say to people in the audience, don't wait until the Q&A session at the end. If something pops into your head while you're listening to this, put it in the comments, and we'll take a look at it. So Bryant, so this whole session is about taking control of your finances, understanding finances, even if you're not a financial professional. I think the point I was making earlier was, even if it's a little bit of a myth that you need as much financial expertise as people claim. I think the financial services industry likes to perpetuate that myth, but actually a lot of this stuff comes from you. So I think it's you've done some really interesting things in My Million Year, and how just ordinary people without big wealth can still take control of their finances and plan their way to financial success. So you've got a bunch of founders in the audience. So what do you do? What do people do when they suddenly find that understanding finance is existential, as in the case of a founder seeking funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great point, Jamie. And that's kind of been my approach, since founding My Million Year, and what's kind of pervaded me, throughout my career. It's always been about, how do we guide the masses, ordinary people like us, to gain that financial independence and thrive instead of just survive. And in doing kind of the research, before jumping in, um, you know, I uncovered some interesting stats. Roughly 1 in 10 people, who are earning over 100K are still living paycheck to paycheck. 75% of people, of Americans, have some form of debt. So we're all in kind of got the same boat here, where we're all dealing with the same struggles. And like you said, it's not as hard to achieve your goals of financial independence and financial freedom. It is closer than you think, and that's kind of been my path, and my personal goal is to help more and more people understand that as my company is so named, helping people to understand that reaching 1 million in net worth is attainable. It is possible to get there. For some quick numbers, you could start with 0, but if you saved $5,000 a year, it would take you some time. It would take you about 60 years to get to 1 million. If you're investing your money in the market, in like the S&P or something. But if you're able to bump that up over time, if you're able to sock away 10,000, that drops to 40 years. If you're able to save 20,000 a year, that becomes from 0 to a million, 25 years. People sometimes feel like that 1 million number is far out of reach and that, hey, I'll never get there. But actually, how much you save a year makes so much more a difference than how much you're actually earning. Because I've spoken to countless people where, somebody who's making over 6 figures is saving very little versus somebody who makes half as much
Right.
but is saving much more.
Right.
They're able to get there that much faster. Now,
Brian, let me hold you there because we've just been joined by Baron Davis.
Yes.
I'd like to introduce him. So, Baron, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Baron is a former professional basketball player. Now he's a studio analyst for NBA on TNT, which covers TNT's broadcasts of games in the National Basketball Association. He's a two-time NBA All-Star, made the All-NBA third team in 2004, and twice led the NBA in steals per game. He's now a serial entrepreneur who also invests in underrepresented founders. So welcome, Baron. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Bryant. Jamie,
Now,
what's happening?
I understand you've got a tight schedule. So, Bryant, forgive me. I've interrupted Nicoletta, and now I'm going to interrupt you. I want to go to Baron because I know he's got to dash off at some point.
No problem.
Baron, this audience is going to love hearing directly from you how an athlete builds on his success in sports into success in business, especially, I think, by building up financial skills and literacy. So I think most of the entrepreneurs in this audience are going to have serious expertise in something that's not finance. So I think it'd be really interesting for them to get inspiration from an athlete who's made that kind of parallel transition into financial sophistication.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's great to be a part of this panel. And I would say for me, like my message to everybody is don't be afraid to fail, right? Failure is success, and some of our greatest innovations and successes happen after failure. So one, we can't be afraid to fail, because if you are afraid to fail, that means that you'll never be able to succeed, right? And so that's, eliminating the doubt. Two is really listening and learning, being curious. I think for me, in my journey, when I was in the NBA, I left my agent when I was 20 years old, started my own agency with my friends, like a real live entourage. And, we were kind of like insiders, but we were outsiders. And what I knew was I wasn't going to go broke. And if I could manage myself, I could figure out all the things that would make me a better manager, right, for the Baron Davis. And so I would try all these things: venture investing, entrepreneurship, building technology, making movies, because I wanted to pioneer, the frontier of athletes. And so, for me, it was really about head down, be first, be curious, right, and take the opportunity as a lesson. And so I always say I got my MBA from the NBA, because I can tell you where all of the jobs exist. I can tell you where the revenue exists, right? And I had to learn this by being an agent. So forcing me to understand my business helped me to understand the overall business and the ecosystem in the industry that I can serve. And so, for young entrepreneurs out there and people looking to invest, it's all about, the work you put in. It's all about the company you surround yourself with, the company you keep. Strategic about, building a life plan, a business plan, right, and a roadmap, and having the right people with you along the way, adding the right people that are with you along the way. You can network as much as you want, but if you don't activate that network or let that network have access to you, then it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to go at this journey alone.
So let me ask you, how old were you when you became an agent? when you started managing in your agency?
I was 22. 22.
Okay. All right. So you started your MBA at the NBA at 22?
At 22, yeah.
No, because
And you know, my first deal was I had a deal on the table from Sprite. My guy at Sprite was leaving to go to Vitamin Water. I didn't know what Vitamin Water was, but I had a great idea that if he was my marketing guy at Sprite and he was leaving to be the head of marketing at Vitamin Water, then he would probably hire me, right? Because we had such a great relationship and he loved my ideas. And all I really cared about was directing a commercial as an athlete. And so I left Sprite with him, or I didn't sign with Sprite. I wanted them signing with Vitamin Water for no money, but with the opportunity to invest. And if I did commercials and things like that, I would get equity in the company. And Vitamin Water was in its, I believe Series A. So, for me, it was like, oh, this is a great opportunity, but the opportunity I really wanted was to direct commercials, right? And so, it was just thinking about when I got the deal, it was like, hey, you don't have money, I have money, I'll invest money. Like, let's see how this goes. And I think, it's about being curious, right? It's about being curious about knowing who you are, and then also just like doubling down on your interests, investing in your interests, because as a 22-year-old, I did not know I was going to turn out like this, but a lot of the decisions I made, a lot of the tough decisions I've had to make in life, now when I look back on investing in entrepreneurs and how do I help, it's more so how do I help? Network of incredible people, and how do I connect the dots for entrepreneurs, for C-suites, for investors, and be at the epicenter of helping people win.
Baron, you're making this sound way too easy. So I want to come back. I want to probe a bit on this 22-year-old who goes from most steals in the NBA to becoming an agent. But first I want to ask Bryant. Baron Davis comes to you and looks for a little bit of help. What would you tell him at age 22? How do you help this guy? Obviously, he pulled it off himself. But if he came to you, Bryant, what would you be telling him about what he should be doing?
Now we'll put aside the fact that Baron Davis is a special individual as an NBA athlete with a very different set of opportunities ahead of him. So speaking more generally, I think you're saying that if a 22-year-old, American came and said, I need some help. How do I get started at 22? Right. That's kind of what you're getting at, right? What would I tell them? And I honestly resonated with a lot of things that Jamie, you said earlier, and Nicola, you said earlier, and things that Baron was pointing out. Like, you have to think about like what is it you want to achieve in your life. I think before you think about how much money it is you're trying to make and just chasing dollar signs, you have to think about like, what is it all for? What are my goals? Like what is the impact I'm trying to have? So I always probe first to try and understand, what are your values? Who are you as a person? Which, Jamie, you mentioned earlier, are some of the questions you're asking as a wealth manager. And, Nicola, when you were saying, how do you evaluate a good founder if you're thinking about parking your VC money? It's largely about what kind of person this is, even more so sometimes than the particular business venture itself, right? So first we need to understand the person in front of you. And from there, I would ask, a few key questions. I need to understand, earning, saving, and debt. As I mentioned before, 75% of Americans have some kind of debt. I need to understand, for that debt, how much is it and what interest are you paying? Some people struggle with the balance between paying off debt or saving that money and investing it. Typically, I say, if your debt is in double digit in terms of interest rate, more than 10%, you're better off paying that off first before trying to save and invest in the market. And then, as I said before, that savings rate is probably the most important thing to understand. Like I said, if you're saving $5,000 a year, from 0 to $1 million, it'll take you 60 years. But if you're saving $20,000 a year, from 0 to a million, it's going to take you just 25 years. So depending on what a person's goals are, we're going to mark down different milestones and say, hey, you're 22 now. By age 30, by age 40, by age 50, where do you want to be? What are the goals and things you want to accomplish by each age? And let's work backwards and say, all right, what kind of net worth can we get you to at each of those key milestone years?
Okay, I want to come back to Baron because I know you have to go. So there's something specifically that I want to ask you. You're now an investor. So what kind of entrepreneurs are you interested in as an investor? What do you find convincing? What are you testing for? And what would you tell the people in this room how they should be presenting themselves to funders?
Is that directed to me, Jamie?
It is, because you're the investor.
Cool.
You're the investor. We'll get back to Nicola. We'll get back to Nicola. She's an angel investor as well. But I want to hear from you.
Nicola.
Okay, well, go ahead, Nicola. You go ahead. You go ahead.
I was enjoying Nicola and Brian. I was enjoying the conversation.
You're too kind. I'm going to keep it short because then I really do want to flip back to you and get your perspectives too. I mean, again, I'm going to come back to saying, like, tell me what success looks like. Like, let's actually get down to like what kind of company is going to make you just shoot for the stars on the hard days and on the good days. And then we're going to get into some things like, what's the total capital that you're going to need? Now, I'm not to be like pessimistic in what has been the hardest few years that any entrepreneur has faced in a long time. But I think one thing that entrepreneurs, again, are not always encouraged to think through is the criticality of dry powder. Mm-hmm. And in the pandemic, our women and our entrepreneurs of color were running at zero. They weren't running at like, we had an incredible chance to reconnect with John Chambers, who, for many of you who may know, he was the chairman of Cisco, CEO, incredible guy, founder, investor now in the best of ways. It's like, you got to have 6 months. If you don't have 6 months, then how can you ever make a pivot? How can you ever sustain things that you don't see coming around the corner? And we're telling that, and we're looking at our entrepreneurs, and they don't have breadcrumbs, my friends, let alone 6 months. So I think we have to be able to invest in ourselves and invest in the uncertainties. And it's always hard when it's this trade-off between like valuation, higher, lower, how much I raise. It's this weird, funky XY axis you're playing with. But don't underestimate the importance of dry powder. I'll just say that. And paying yourself in those moments too. But Baron, what would you add to that? What have I missed out?
I mean, I love the dry powder analogy. I think for us, it's like when we look at investing, we look at doing, right? And so it's almost for us, it's not called investing, it's called doing the work, right? And so Jamie, impact investing, right? It's the work, right? And so female entrepreneur, fintech, solving problems, for 529s and family giving, UNES, that's the work. How can we take the work and bring that work into our community? Goal setter, fintech, gamification for kids, credit cards. Like, we're in the fintech space because financial literacy is a theme that I want to attack, right? And I want to break down financial literacy so I can invest in as many companies that are doing this, so I can tell them, stop telling my people that it's financial literacy, right? It's activation, it's business. I'd rather you say business 101 to me than financial literacy because, Jamie, as that 22-year-old kid, I didn't have a Brian, right, who would explain something as simple as, hey, debt, income, where do you want to be, right? I didn't have someone like Nicola that was like, hey, you're going to run out of money. You know what I mean? Investing in your own company. You got to go out and raise money. This is how you do it. This is how you prepare 6 months out. And so for me, it was like going through all those trials and tribulations. Now when I see talent, I like, let me ride shotgun, because if you're doing the work, and whether it's a big investment, a small investment, we're going to make sure that the work is going to get done. People of color on your cap table, and you're saying that in your speech, oh, you're going to let us in and we're going to make sure that happens over the next 2 weeks, right? And for us, it's like, that's what we need. We need access, right? And we also need access and opportunity coming to us. And so for us, it's all about doing the work. It's the entrepreneur, right? The problem you're solving, where you're going to be, how much capital do you need? Like, where do you think that this company will be, 3-5 years from now? And like, who are you hunting after, right? Are you the hunter? Are you the prey? And so for us, it's like, it's really just trying to get inside the DNA. I mean, due diligence is due diligence, numbers is numbers, but Nicola, very well as Jamie. It's your gut, right? It's your gut. And
Okay,
so a problem with what's happened over, the pandemic and like the Black Lives Matter movement is everybody made these pledges. Color, and these funds, but guess what? Nobody knew how to go access the money. And so the money has been sitting there, and then the companies say, oh, well, we'll just put it back in our bank account because nobody wants it. But we said it, right? And so we just have to take the next step, and we have to take the next step to actually meet in the middle. And I think access is what we're after, right? So having access to great, extraordinary entrepreneurs that could be unicorns, and then also getting access, right, into the private clubs and the elite clubs. It's like we got to be in there too, because we have to figure out and close this gap.
Baron, I've got about 15 more questions for you.
I got some more minutes.
I'm being told that you've got to go, so
I'm okay.
You're okay.
I think so. Yeah.
That's not what they tell me, but okay. All right. So financial inclusion, really interesting. I mean, you've said a number of things. I'm just thinking about founders in the audience who are trying to figure out what would impress Baron Davis. I mean, and you've talked about, are you solving a problem? Do you believe in yourself? Do I see talent? Do you deliver on what you say? What else is there? What else should these guys be what else should these guys be thinking when they pitch to Baron Davis for a concept?
I would say, one, you want to be, overconfident. And a lot of times I think, people want to, you want to make an impression. You know what I mean? Like you want to it's almost like you want to win a pitch, but a lot of times you shouldn't approach it as you're pitching, right? You have to talk about this company like you work there every day.
Yeah.
And I myself, I would love to see, I like entrepreneurs who are raw, who are real, and when they get off the phone, they have problems to solve. And so I would say, don't ever hide, right, from who you are, what you are. And then also, when you're presenting, get into that flow and that space to make it a conversation, right? The pitch deck is the guide. You know what I mean? The meeting and the intros.
See, we're losing precious seconds from
who you are, what you do. You know what I mean?
I love when you say
icebreaker.
When you say get in the flow, you mean the flow. This is the heightened state of awareness and consciousness. Is that what you're talking about? And you're starting to sound like a basketball player. I mean, when you say the flow, you mean that
state of
mind, the state of mind of total connectivity with what you're doing. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, and know your business, right? Your flow is your business. Know your business, because when questions are asked and things like that, and if there's something you don't know, if you know your business, you're going to say, I don't know that.
Yeah.
right? And so honesty is so important, because it's like you don't have, and when I mean when you're in flow, you don't have to be a poser. You are who you are. This company is who it is, and it's the time that it is where it is why you're asking the money to get there, right? So know-it-alls and experts don't win all the time.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. No, I think the authenticity you're talking about has come up with Nicola, has come up with Bryant. I mean, it really seems to be that authenticity, self-awareness, know who you are. That all seems to be really quite core. So Nicola, let me ask you, what particular challenges, so the center focuses on women and minorities. What are the particular challenges, and maybe Baron, you have a view on this, that women and minorities face when they're pitching to the standard funder set?
It's I'm not going to say it's a wicked problem, but it's certainly a wicked problem territory, unfortunately, when we look at it. We actually just spent a year and a half looking at the data for our women entrepreneurs predominantly, although a lot of them are in that intersectionality of women and women entrepreneurs of color. Statistically, you may have seen it, the recent numbers are not good. Our women entrepreneurs are receiving percent lowered valuations than our male entrepreneurs are. And they are putting themselves on balance sheets at a rate of $53,000 less per year, which, as Bryant has clearly identified, that's not chump change. And the worst environment is when we sort of leapfrog to exit at whatever point in moment that is, that's more than contributing to the statistics around the wealth gap issues and the inequities of the wealth gap that our entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color face. So it is clearly valuation, it is clearly ownership, it is clearly pay. In the US, it's also harder because, quite honestly, statistically, we haven't even had data sets that have shown the liquidity environments from when women founders or entrepreneurs of color take companies early on and grow them through, and the incredible returns that are present. So because of some of those things, it becomes this more challenging environment where pattern matching exists because it is the easy thing to do. And the optics are such that the returns are not forcing and pushing people to say, you got to do better than that. Now, there's incredible organizations out there that are really fighting the good fight and making a major difference. And I am optimistic. We wouldn't be in this space if we weren't. Entrepreneurship is only for the optimistic on a great day and a bad day. So I'm a big believer that this is all going to change. However, in order for it to change, every one of us has a role and responsibility to make sure that we are encouraging our women, our entrepreneurs of color, to have access to saying no to a bad deal, to prioritizing their health and their worth on cap tables, and to make sure that we're not letting anyone slip through the cracks anymore. If we don't do that, then we are all at fault for letting this perpetual problem exist.
Great, thank you for that. Brian, I want to ask you, before you're talking about an entrepreneur making his first million, and Baron, I don't know when you made your first million, but Brian, here's an example of a guy who really pulled it off. So I'd love to know what it felt like, Baron, what it felt like when you made your first million, and Bryant, did he do it the right way, or did he do it some other genius way? So Baron, tell us what your first million felt like.
So honestly, I never got to my first million until I learned a big lesson before I even got to $1 million. So when you get drafted, they give you your first check, which is a bonus check.
Yeah.
And at the time, that check was like in the mid six figures. And I knew that our contract was locked. And so like whatever I was getting for the year, that was just an advance, right? To get the money started. Like, hey, you can move now. Like you're on the team, you're official. And I remember getting my check in the mail and I was so excited. And I just wanted to see it. I wanted to like show my ground people. And when I opened up the check, I was wildly embarrassed because I was like, somebody has stole my money.
Whoa.
SSS9 hash. What is this? You know what I mean? California federal. I'm like, wait. Who's taking my money? And so, so I had to go to the bank and figure out like who these people are that's taking my money. And I realized it was the government. And then the big lesson I learned is when I went to deposit my check. I went to go check my banking account. The financial advisor that I was dealing with had taken a loan out in my name when I was in college or in my transition and never told me. And so they basically replenished that cash out of my account, or like half of it out of my account, saying, oh, you have to pay for all this and draft and da-da-da-da. And that's when I realized, wait, hold on, this is not cool. And so I had them put my money back. I fired them. And then from that point, I got every check. I went to the bank and I would just deposit my checks in the bank until the lady thought that I was crazy. And she was like, you're too young. Why are you, and I met the bank president. And so I had mentors to kind of like walk me up the chain. But it was the fear of, you know what? All right, I know who Social Security is now. I don't like them. You know what I mean? Because they keep taking my money. I think I'm like 2023. I'm trying to figure out like, how do I get the rest of that money back that the government is taking? And so, you learn a lot. And I think it was depositing my checks, taking my physical check and said, I worked hard for this, going right to the bank and saying, hey, I want to deposit, 6 figures in my account. And the lady, the teller, she was like, come here to the side. Boy, don't come in here with them checks like that.
Oh, shit.
You go to the back of the bank, you meet the bank president, and she helped me. You know what I mean? But she allowed me to she was afraid that I was just walking in there like, hey, I got this check as a 22-year-old. And she actually looked out, and that was the first wave of like people helping you, right? Being innocent, being curious, being a little naive, right? The right people will find you and help you.
Brian, is that how it normally goes?
I think this is a unique story. But Baron, I wish I could have been there for you back then.
I know.
How does it normally go, Brian?
So normally how it goes is, I would say kudos to Baron, for having the curiosity and the courage to go up and do that, because that's sometimes the first step that people are afraid to take, especially in populations of color, immigrant communities. There may be a little bit of mistrust or uncertainty, right, when approaching a bank. Trust is the first step, right? We all have to learn how to make the right decisions for ourselves. And what you did in understanding the loan situation with your financial advisor and deciding that wasn't for you, smart move. These are all really smart moves. For most people who, let's say, don't, might not have, the bank teller pull you aside and say, hey, this is how it's actually going to work, right? Most people are kind of either a little bit suspicious of banks. They're not sure what account they should open, what's checking, what's savings. Do I get a credit card? Do I need all these loans that they're offering me? And it can get overwhelming. And unfortunately, it ends up with a lot of people maybe putting away too much money in cash, or under the mattress, or just sitting in a checking account and not being invested in any kind of way that the money can grow over time. So unfortunately, the lack of literacy, through no fault of their own, it is a complicated system. But with a little bit of guidance, from and this is where I usually step in to help people. A little bit of guidance goes a long way. Just a little bit of understanding goes a long way, so that you can empower yourself the way Baron did, to then ask the right questions, find the right mentors. And if the right mentors don't fall from the sky, or you don't bump into them, that's why they're coaches like me who are here to help.
So speaking of questions, if anybody in the audience has a question while we're all still sitting here, go ahead and throw it into the comments, because I'd love to hear from what the audience has to think about has to say about all this stuff. Nicola, I wanted to ask you in particular about the in-person pitch. So the personal presentation when somebody comes in, when a woman or an entrepreneur of color comes in. Is there any dynamic in the pitch event itself that you can advise on?
This is super tactical, but again, I think it's one that we don't often talk a lot about. So we spend a lot of time shaking our heads going, oh, don't say that. And it comes up. Do not use these numbers are conservative. Do not use it. Your numbers are not conservative. Your numbers are a part of you. They're a part of your business. They are what you are talking about. They are an extension of your thoughtfulness and the reasons that you're building this business. So avoid phrases that can be limiting. Now, when you practice your pitch, and it will never feel the same as when you are giving it to live, again, I really encourage you to think of your slides, just like everyone has talked about here today, as a companion. But I will always remember I was about 2 years into co-leading band, and we lost power, and pitches used to be done in person at a lovely country club. And this incredible woman who I was so inspired by, she had so much energy, passion, purpose, belief. This was going to be an all-star investment for us. Lost power. And her face just fell. And she was just frozen. And from the side, I came up and I was like, we've got this. It's just a conversation. Ignore the fact that all the AV in the world has just gone to hell. All that matters is we're having a conversation, and you're going to tell me about your business just like you always would.
That's what Baron was telling us. Just
yes,
be you in a really convincing way.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it.
Exactly. Start with you also. Remember, one of the most important things that entrepreneurs need to do is connect the dots, or as I like to kind of think of it, build bridges. So
Yes.
a lot of the time you're like not thinking like you have the cred that you need to be able to be the quote unquote visionary of a company. You see bridges that others don't see. That's why you're uniquely qualified to do this. Help draw those bridges for us to connect, of like, oh, you saw this from the customer side, or you experienced this from the parent side, or you believe in this because of what you saw in your community. You have more credibility than you're giving yourself credit for. And if you need to know how, my favorite hack on this, and it's not our hack, it's been around for half of forever, ask 5 people to tell you why you should be the one leading this charge.
Bingo.
People will give you the words that you need to be using for yourself.
Bingo.
Baron, did you get a lot of good advice?
I'm soaking all this up.
No, I mean during your process, not during this meeting. During this.
No, I mean meeting 5 people, that that's something that has stuck with me. I think a lot of this is, every time you hear it, you it's learned, right? And so, I know it's difficult sometimes to be in like seminars and Zooms and conferences and things like that. But it's like, if we can double down on these things that keep recurring in our lives, right? Or the things that keep recurring, like the five people rule, that's Bible, right? That's law, right? That should be law for an entrepreneur. That should be law for an investor. And I say for me, it's just like, you got to be a sponge. You got to really be a sponge. You got to sponge up your business. You got to sponge up your employees, right? You got to soak up everything if you are the leader, because there's multiple hats that you have to wear up here as a visionary, and there's a ton of people that you have to think about when you're building a bridge, right? How many people are going to cross it? Who's getting access? What are the connections that you're making, right? As a builder, as a visionary. And, the things that you manifest, the things that you build will come to fruition.
That's fantastic. Baron, I'm really appreciative of you joining us today. This has been fantastic to talk to you. And I know you have to leave, and even if you do leave, we're going to keep talking about you because you've been just fantastic.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it. Brian, Nicola, thank you.
It's been a pleasure,
I hope
Baron.
to connect with you all after this. This will be awesome.
Yeah,
Keep
thanks so
doing the
much
good work.
for your work.
Definitely.
Thank
Yeah.
you
too.
very much. Thanks, Baron.
Keep it
Thanks.
real.
All right, have a great one.
Appreciate it. So long.
That was fun, huh, Jamie?
It was fun. It was fun. And I wasn't very good at collecting the questions, but here's a couple. This one was from Mo Hanafi. Sorry if you've already spoken about this. I had a call. When talking to impact investors, how much detail should we go into with numbers to demonstrate the social impact we're trying to make?
So can I use a free tool that I love out there? We didn't develop it, but it's just so good. I have to share the light for anyone in the impact space. One of our dear venture capitalist friends in the industry, City Light, that invests in the seed stage, a big data technologist of their own kind, came out of 2U, which is an ed tech, and just really good souls all the way through. And they realized it's a real pain point, like, because a lot of people that are doing impact work, it's hard to quantify impact at a financial layer. So they are like, well, we can solve that. We have enough. We've seen all the deal flow. We know how to help people think through. So they built this free tool, my friends, called the Impact Beacon. You can find it through our site or through their site directly, just from a link perspective. Go in, enter your information. It will customize and codify the actual impact that you are delivering in the world based on the vision that you're setting. And then boom, it's a downloadable infographic that you can pop into your pitches, that you can put anywhere that you want out in there. It is so good. If you haven't seen it yet, highly recommend Impact Beacon, because it's customized to you. And it's, again, free, best of things. And they just want more great impact entrepreneurs in the world. So definitely check it out. It may be a helpful tool.
So if you just Google Impact Beacon, it'll show up.
Yeah, you can go to thecenter.nasdaq.org to find it, or City Light. Their firm page has a dedicated place where you can enter your information. And again, it'll pop it right out as a great infographic for your decks or anything else that you need.
Because that's an issue for founders who are, killing themselves to get an operation, a business up and running. I mean, they every breath, every waking moment is dedicated to this. And then a funder comes along and says, could you count the following things and tell me about how many rubbish bins you put out and how much did you recycle? And it becomes, for people who are kind of at the edge of existence, just barely getting through, it's a real burden. So I think any tools that you can come up with, I think would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a question from Susan Patrick. So what is your respective top piece for a ground zero build? I have approximately 18,000 LinkedIn connections I'd like to draw on for my other professional skills. Now, Susan, where did you get 18,000 LinkedIn connections?
That's a big number. I don't know, Brian, do you want to kick it off? I think you mean top piece of advice, I guess, right? I'm thinking that's where we're heading on that.
Yeah. I think with that many connections, I think it can be overwhelming to figure out, like, where's the value in my network. So I think you always need to take it back to, I feel like we've been saying this the entire time, but like, what is your objective? Like, what is your value? Like, what are you trying to achieve, so that you can like narrow the field? Because I would say, the absolute number of connections doesn't necessarily translate to value for you per se, if you're not sure of what your goal is. I think you can find just as much value in a really core group of, let's say, 10 sponsors or mentors, depending on what your goal is. I think the key piece of advice, if you have like a massive network, kudos on accumulating that many connections. But then you're probably thinking about, okay, what can I do, with this fantastic network I've cultivated? What are my goals? What are my objectives? What kind of impact? What can I achieve with this group of people? What do you think, Nicola?
Yeah, I love all of that. I mean, I think there used to be this saying that was around the Valley for way too long. So I'm from Silicon Valley, so sorry, but shorthand it and call it Valley. But the credibility is the number one reason founders get funded, and it's also the number one reason they don't.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time, our network needs to know the extent of which we're passionate about things and how we're enhancing our credibility in that bridge building of a founder journey. And so I would be really thoughtful in kind of I don't want to call it your content development, maybe your personal brand ambassadorship, and really how are you sharing out others, and what is the intent and purpose from which you're connecting with your community. And they're part of your tribe now, right? They are your tribe there to a certain degree, but you're going to have to help them know how to connect with you. And if you sometimes feel that there's a friction with like, oh, we met at this thing and I don't know why you're reaching out now, or you ping out on LinkedIn and then it's like crickets, nobody responds. Sometimes part of that environment can just be that they don't quite know how, why, or what. So when in doubt, realize that part of our job is to help bridge and build that credibility story that we're trying to, that makes people want to lean in to say, this is amazing, how can I help? Or let's get some time together. Job is never to close, but always to get that capacity and abundancy of a meeting time to go into more detail and information gathering. Again, your community is an information gathering source as much as it's a push mechanism. And I think that duality and that two-way street, again, enhances credibility at the end of the day.
That's great. Thank you. I've got a request from Ama Kiampo from Scale Up Africa in Ghana, who wants the link to Beacon Impact. So Nicola, do you mind putting it in? And the reason I make this special request is I lived in Ghana as a child. And so anytime somebody has a request from Ghana, I like to do what I can. So can you stick that in?
Absolutely. I'm going to grab the link and pop it in.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay. Brian, we're running out of time, but any closing thoughts? I mean, you guys, you and you two and Baron have been just so tremendous in this discussion. I feel like I wish I were an entrepreneur, but I'm not, because I've learned so much from you and from Baron. So, Brian, a closing thought here?
Yeah, I think the key thing here is nothing is really out of reach, right? With the right determination, the willingness to persevere, the ability to make real human connections, and a strong understanding of who you are and what it is you want to achieve, you actually can do anything. You can go from 0 to 1 million or 0 to 1 billion. It's up to you.
Amazing, amazing. Nicola.
Oh, there have been so many good nuggets that have been dropped from our panelists today. I don't know how to top it. I would just come back to saying that the whole purpose of this is think like a wealth manager. And so to all of you founders who are on this incredible charge, make sure that you're prioritizing your goals, your dreams, your vision, your financial security above all else. This is not charitable work without that element of sustainability above all else. You can't do this work. So embed it into sharing it out. You put it out in the world, great things will happen. You'll inspire others as well. The center is built on everything for free. It's all about paying it forward. So also know that others will be inspired to believe in their possibility and to bring those dreams forward the more you share it out. So just keep sharing.
Fantastic. Hey, we're having too much fun here. We need Gary in here. That's great. Gary, come on in and join the fun. This has been great, Gary. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, it's easy to do it when like all of you are so amazing. So thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with all of us, and also kind of your ability to inspire, because I think that's also like a huge part of like what the world needs now. So yeah, thank you for that. And I guess, yeah, well, and I want to say thank you to Jamie, our amazing moderator, as well as angel investor, par excellence. So like any of you out there that need money, no, Jamie, I'm not going to say that, but if you have a really good company and you're a diverse founder, and we know that a lot of people won't actually see you, Jamie will actually see you. Nicola, the work that you're doing at NASDAQ is amazing. And Brian, I wish I had had your tools and guidance when I was like younger, so that I would be able to kind of, maybe my life would have been a little different. So thank you all for the time that you spent with us. And yeah, the next event, we're going to try and do it the last week of April. So watch this space. We'll send each of you an email with the recording from this event. So you'll also be able to kind of share it with anyone that you know that maybe could be inspired by it as well, but couldn't join us. So please do feel free to share it. Also, please feel free to download the app and send us feedback, because we're trying to kind of create a world in which everyone gets access to the funding and the mentors that they need so that they can realize their dreams. And so we can only do this if you help us. So please download the app, share it with anyone that you think needs it. And above all, send us feedback so we can make it better. So I think with that, thank you all. And yeah, have a good evening.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you
so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.